Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, Trackstar family. What's poppin'? Hopefully, everybody is okay. But I am back with the promised cassette tape side B for the men for the unhealthy soul ties. Hopefully, everyone is doing well this evening. And if you are here for the very first time, welcome. This is One Track Record, where we are constantly looking at track records with each other in all types of relationships, including the one with yourself and the Most High. I am Shaina, okay? Some may call me One Track. That's okay. I go by both, okay? Now, if you are here for the very first time, let me briefly explain. This episode is for men. However, the cassette tape side A last week was for the women. If you haven't already, you can catch up on that. But I'll kind of be keeping you in the loop of what's going on with this one as far as information goes. That way, you are somewhat caught up just from a different perspective. Okay? So, ladies, there is one rule and one rule only, and you already know. For those of you who are new, who just happen to be a lady, okay? The general rule is when you are here for the cassette tape side episodes, if you are a woman in the cassette tape side B, the rule is no heckling the men in the comment section or the live chat, okay? Please don't come in here with an amen too loud, with a tongue pop, with an eye roll. None of the above, okay? If you come in peace, come for encouragement. We are a family after all, okay? Now, that's general warning number one for the announcements. But number two, and you know I have to do it. So you know where I'm going with this. Warning, I am not a licensed psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, and for a little razzle dazzle, I threw it in this episode. I'm also not a licensed medical professional, okay? I know some of y'all treat me like I am your personal therapist, to which I must confirm I cannot be because I'm not licensed. If y'all want to pay for me to go to school, we can talk about that off of here, okay? But I'm just a millennial on the internet with access, and I am here to speak from a place of both learning and understanding simultaneously. You are here to learn with me and experience things with me on this journey of life through your track record. I am living mine, okay? With the Most High. Now that that's all out of the way, let us begin with the episode. Unhealthy soul ties and being unequally yoked. Am I in trouble? Cassette tape side B for the men. Welcome. Okay. For those of you who have already been on cassette tape side A for the women, you may have noticed that I typically like to ask rhetorical questions in order for the listener and myself to gain some understanding about what we'll be discussing today. So, the first question that was brought about was a soul tie. What is that? So, let's go ahead and look into what a soul tie is. A soul tie is the joining of two souls emotionally and spiritually between a couple. This may be a one time ordeal or a series of intimate physical encounters. Ooh, sounds pretty serious, right? Well, let me help you wrap your mind around it, men, because I know after a long day of work or just a long work week, some of you are like, all right, Shay, all right, one track. I'm going to need you to break this down for me, Barney style, because I am holding on to my last brain cell. It's been a long day. I cannot. And I got you. So, in layman terms, a soul tie is the direct correlation of a couple who decide to be intimate in more than one ways, being that they are connected emotionally and spiritually. The connection is stronger because of the physical aspect of it. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, I also came with a series of other questions for the ladies when it came down to speaking of how soul ties correlate with spirit, being that spirit is typically looked at kind of the same as soul as far as media goes and whatnot. But I'm actually here to tell you that spirit and soul, even though they're used interchangeably, are different. So here were the questions that I asked the ladies last week. Why should we focus more on mind, body, and spirit over mind, body, and soul when speaking of soul ties? And is soul the same as spirit? Are they different? To which I just answered, they are different. For those of you who have been on this channel for a while, you may have noticed that one track likes to define things outside of the English language, being that she said, and I quote, the English language is a bastard language. One track, watch your mouth. And I say that because if you look at the English language, it is very much watered down, and it is also an inclusion of multiple different origins, being of Germanic languages primarily. We have Greek, we have Hebrew, we have a lot of things thrown and mixed in everywhere, right? This is a Babylon society. But unlike the cassette tape side A, I actually, aside from soul, looking it up, the definitions in the Hebrew and in the Greek, looked up spirit as well. So, ladies, if you're here right now, you get an extra portion of knowledge. You're welcome. Let's look into the differences between soul and spirit. Let's start with soul. Soul in the Hebrew, as the ladies are aware of now, is nephesh, meaning breath. And I gave the references of Genesis 2 and 7 and Ecclesiastes 3 and 19 for reference. Also refers to life giving blood, and how in the Greek, the term soul is psyche or consciousness. And by definition, with the Hebrew and the Greek combined, you as a being that in Genesis 2 and 7, God actually breathed life into Adam by his nostrils. Okay. And the idea of the Greek being that the mind is also a part of the soul, that at the time of your existence from the Creator, you were able to be a being with purpose in life by the breath of life that was breathed into you and the mind that also attached. How powerful is that? In a world where everybody wants to treat you as if you're just another social security number, men, and they want to measure you by how much you make, what you look like, how tall you are, you were made with purpose. You received the breath of life into your lungs, into your body, and were pumped up with life-giving blood, attached with a mind, and not only just a mind, a consciousness centered around you, and you were created for a time such as this. If that's not powerful, don't let nobody tell you nothing. In the world of candy, you are not a yellow starburst. You are a pink starburst, okay? No diddy. Now let's go to spirit. Spirit, I'm going to break down, of course, in the Hebrew and also the Greek. Now stay with me because this is pretty lengthy. The spirit in previous episode tape side A, I said it was the gateway, which I've shortened here as the path. So the spirit is the path that can get you closer to or further from God. In the Hebrew, we use the word ruach, meaning wind or spirit, okay? Which you can actually find those references in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where the Spirit of God moved over the water when God Himself, the Creator, spoke the world and everything into existence, which means what? The tribune, or what we would know as the Trinity, God, Father, the Son, and the Spirit, all three of them were there at the very beginning. So powerful, which is why I put up this pyramid. Aha. Anyway, ruach, meaning wind or spirit. Spirits can be good or bad, but like I've said in previous episodes, when dealing with people and relationships and track records, every single relationship you may come in contact with is transactional. Which means what? The spirit that is within each person you come in contact with is transferable. What do you mean by transferable? Well, if somebody steps to you right now and they're in a bad mood, it's pretty safe to say that if you're not in good spirits already and you have a solid ability to continue to walk in spirit and not just flesh, that person's spirit of negativity can then transfer to you. Fair enough, right? It's transferable. But keep a note on spirit because we're going to reference Numbers chapter 5, verse 30 in a minute. Keep that in the back of your mind. It's very important. Now let's move to the Greek when it comes to spirit. So in the Greek, There's two words to define spirit primarily. The first one is neuter, ooh, which sounds pretty crazy, all right? No, this is nothing to do with castration. You can breathe, okay? I'm not doing nothing to you. But the second word is pneuma. So let's take a look at the first word, that neuter word, right? So in the Greek, there is a bit of a weird phenomenon. Well, I shouldn't say weird. It's a bit odd to those who speak English as a first and only language. Because in the Greek, they believe in feminine, masculine, and then neuter, which is gender neutral. But one track, isn't for the most part biologically there are only two genders, were male and female? What's with this neutrality here? Hear me out. Let me explain. The gender neutral comes with the idea of the spirit being an entity, where an entity doesn't necessarily have to be masculine or feminine, being that they weren't created like us with purpose as a living thing. Aha. So a spirit can be within you, intertwined with a soul, but it can also be something not of this realm. Mm. But let's look at pneuma. So pneuma refers to wind or breath. Think of the word pneumonia. Yes, it was derived from the Greek, which typically refers to what when you're dealing with things like pneumonia? An issue with the breath of life, the spirit that was breathed inside of you. You see how they're interchangeable now? Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So, even with the words that we use in English, primarily in medicine, dealing with the body and the mind, help to further bring understanding that the soul, right, is the being who we are in essence at the core, and our purpose and the breath of life that we took in order to live on this planet, in this dimension, and do what we got to do, knowing that there's a destination after this. But the spirit, the things that are outside of us, constantly will influence and determine where our soul will go based on what permeates our personal spirit. So, just by these definitions that I just mentioned, it's safe to say that just kissing and exchanging breath or wind, pneuma, with each other can influence your spirit, which navigates your soul to be intertwined with a partner metaphysically. Mind blown. Now, some of you may not be following what I'm saying, so I'm trying to go as slow as possible. But I'll give it to you this way. When it comes to the mind, body, and spirit, on cassette tape side A, I mentioned the idea of Christ and what he did on the cross. There was something that was going on in more than just the physical realm, but something happened within the spiritual realm simultaneously. I'll explain. So, remember how I said the English language is very limited? Oh, I meant that because Literal translations now in our current text will tell you that some of JC's last words were of that he said, "It is finished." But I'm here to tell you the original language in which he spoke, being Aramaic, suggests that he didn't just say that the deed was done and it was finished. What he was really saying was the debt has been paid. So some of you may be wondering, what debt is she talking about? Well, the debt would have been the sins to cover the multitude of sins that we would all indulge in even before we were on this realm as physical beings with the breath of life and the purpose of life and the blood pumped into our veins as a soul became flesh. Okay? He did this in order for us to have a chance for the soul to reach a destination with him. But in order for him to give us that chance, he had to go through this human experience the same way we are right now, the same temptations, everything, but he never folded, okay? But something happened as he was dying. The main thing was, after saying the debt has been paid, he also in Aramaic said, "I commend my spirit." Well, one track, what does that mean? He had to give up the spirit or the life force within him to transcend to a different dimension. He had to return at the right hand of the Father. But he couldn't leave us all together after paying the debt. There's no way somebody who paid a debt is going to leave you to continue doing the things that kept you in bondage without somebody to help you or overlook just to make sure you're doing and you're on the right track, right? So, what happened? Well, as he ascended, his spirit or the Holy Spirit, the set apart spirit for you and me and whoever else decides to accept what happened, now lives within you and resides in your physical body. But the problem is, your spirit man, your soul, is at constant war with your flesh. The same struggle he had on that cross between physically dying, but the spirit wants to leave, is the same thing we face every day when we decide to give up the carnal, the flesh, the silly things that pass away of this world to make sure that our soul is intact and is on the right track to where we want it to go. But you see, indulging in things like casual hookups does not bring our soul peace. It disturbs it because as a being with a soul, typically what happens is whatever you feed, whichever half of you feed, is the one that becomes stronger. So if you're a person who feeds the spirit more than you do the flesh, you're going to hear and understand a little bit better when it comes to the things the creator wants you to versus someone who constantly lives to please themselves in the flesh. They no longer have room to feed the spirit, and the spirit and the soul simultaneously starve. Do you see what's going on here about how things are transactional? So, the main question I also want to ask Is your soul or spirit man vulnerable when you do the deed, even though it's typically a different experience than women? To which I say, yes, you are vulnerable, men. We're going to get into that right now. Outside from the experience of doing the deed, men are able to feel something called oxytocin. Okay. Women also experience oxytocin as well, but men only release oxytocin during the deed when they're in love. This also includes when they're in love, feeling oxytocin through hugs, considerate acts by their partner or their child or children, from pets, etc. Men, the power that you have when you are in love, that the world is trying to lie and say, nah, don't be in love. Be a hoe. It's fun. They lied to you, sir. They lied. Let me tell you the power of oxytocin that you have from being in love. Oxytocin is a hormone and a neurotransmitter responsible for the feel goods, okay, of physical contact. Again, when a man is in love, whether it be a man and his partner or even a father and his child. It could also be between friends. No diddy. However, this can also enhance feelings or a spirit of jealousy. When a man is in love, he tends to be a little bit possessive over his partner. And I'm going to show you something that not a lot of people have spoken about. I'm taking it back Old Testament. Okay? Bear with me. We are about to go back to where I told you to hold your finger when I was explaining spirit in Hebrew with the idea of Numbers chapter 5, verse 30. Let's go there right now. So, a little bit of backstory after I read this. Numbers chapter 5, verse 30. And I'm reading from the King James Version. Or when the spirit of jealousy cometh upon him, and he be jealous over his wife, and shall set the woman before the Lord, and the priest shall execute upon her all this law. Some of you are like, what in the thee and thou'st did you just say to me? Hold on. Basically, what this is saying, there is a certain spirit that may come over a man who has a healthy soul tie with his wife, okay, in a legitimate marriage. But you may need to have a little bit of backstory for the rest of what happened in verse 30. So, before verse 30, in Numbers chapter 5, it speaks about a particular custom that was done amongst God's chosen people. And when Moses had gone through writing 613 laws, yes, over 600 laws that God's chosen people were required to abide by, which seems pretty impossible to say the least, if you're a logical thinker. What was happening before is that sacrifices with animals were being made in order to atone for the sin, in order to basically come with to God and say, Lord, I'm sorry. Which is exactly why JC came, so he could stop all this slaughter, this senseless slaughter, because there ain't enough animals on the planet for us to keep going through this over and over again. I'm sorry, there's just not. But back to the topic at hand. In this custom, a man who suspected his wife of being unfaithful in these times would go to a mediator, a priest, who was the middleman between the person who is accusing said woman of being adulterous, the mediator, and God. And what would happen is there's a certain particular bitter water that a woman would be required to drink if her husband suspected that she was not faithful. And in this custom, as she drank the bitter water, if she was indeed faithful, she would be able to drink this bitter water and would be fine physically. However, if she came to the altar of the Lord and she drank this bitter water in front of this priest and her husband, and she was not faithful, her stomach would swell, number one. Number two, she would miscarry. And number three, her womb would be considered cursed. Pretty powerful things happening right now in this text. Things that make you go, whoa. What did you just say? Yes, you heard me correctly. That's what was going on. So, now that you understand the backstory and the whole execution of law, this is further proof that through oxytocin and the idea of creating soul ties, healthy or not, if a man does not have the reassurance that his partner is faithful to him and him only, it can wreak havoc within a man's spirit, which also torments his soul. Do you see why God intended for marriage and monogamy to be synonymous? This is not a laughing matter. I'm not even trying to make light of this through any jest, nothing. Okay? Science actually says men on average that were given more oxytocin by the woman they loved felt less stressed, making fidelity and monogamy more desirable. When a man is able to love a woman, just one, don't be like Solomon out here. You see what happened to old boy. Okay, he was greedy. He had over 700 wives, mad concubines. Don't be like him. Him and his father, they were men after God's own heart, and they were blessed and rich indeed and wise. But boy, women were their downfalls. Don't be like them, okay? Just because it said it in the Bible doesn't mean it didn't come without consequences. Because that's another thing. I don't like when people manipulate the Bible for it to work for them and they didn't know the context of it. This is why I gave y'all the backstory of what I just gave y'all. But anyway, it is easy for a man to submit to a woman when he's in love with her and sees the value of her. Being that oxytocin, the high it gives you, the more a man experiences, aka the more you strengthen a soul tie, even just by kissing, hugging, and knocking boots, you may make a man a little crazy about you. You his little yeah. Okay? Because when men fall in love with women, they have a tendency they have a tendency to put her on a pedestal that when she disappoints or betrays him, it can be devastating. Versus women are expected and pressured at times to forgive. Never in numbers did it actually say, from what I've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, that the woman was able to appeal and say, nah, I ain't cheat. What I'm doing this for? No, her husband wanted to do it, whether she cheated or not, she did it. She could have been pissed off too and say, why I'm doing all this and I know I'm faithful. But the reason typically why this wasn't done and there was no rebuttal is because there was a certain order, which still exists today, where men should be submissive to God and women should be submissive to husbands, not their boyfriends, not their little friends, not their little yeah, not their sneaky link, a husband. Okay? Let's get that straight. Come back on the screen, my little icon. Anyway, studies also show that oxytocin levels in men, depending on how high or how low, can determine if he can trust you or if he despises you. If a man feels emotionally, spiritually, and physically neglected, he may develop something called emotional divorce. Ooh, sis, never did you just throw another psychology term at me. What is your problem? Please do tell. Just shut your mouth and keep on talking. What is emotional divorce? I got you. Emotional divorce. In terms of psychology, here it goes. A legally married couple who goes through the motions and no longer shares goals. They are what you would call unequally yoked. They are not moving in tandem towards the same wants, desires. They are two different beings now. They are no longer one. They live separate lives with minimal interactions, which then leads to emotional detachment. Did we not talk about detachment personality styles when it comes to side A? This is heavy. No, y'all, this is heavy because look at even the divorce rates. Emotional divorce isn't the same as divorce, okay? Emotional divorce is typically what takes place before actual divorce comes into play, which proves divorce is a very strenuous process. What may start in the mind and the heart as a spirit of maybe jealousy, possessiveness, not coming to terms and wanting the same thing as your partner, going through mental anguish, emotional anguish, and then physical when it's final that you're divorced. Who wants to go through all of that? When at the end of the day, you still may even be in love with this person off the simple fact that you have a soul tie. Soul ties are not easy to get rid of, they are a covenant that you make. Okay? Now, let's talk about coming into agreement with circumstances by way of marriage or consummation. Men, if you're not on the same page with your partner, you are susceptible to feeling a sense of isolation, and the both of you may be under strain in all these areas separately. This is why it is important how you come into agreement with spirits. If you sense a spirit of jealousy, could be from a man or a woman, and y'all are not married, ooh, baby, that soul tie done ran deep. Y'all need to be delivered because y'all are acting as if you're married and you're about it, but you don't want to be, is a very dangerous game. Your soul, your partner's soul, is at stake here because the Most High, the Creator, is not pleased with that. He's not telling you you can't enjoy knocking boots, but there's a reason why he had it specifically for those who decided to make a covenant and become one and legally do things. You can have vows with somebody to be married, spiritual vows, vows that are very hard to break, even though you no longer want to be with said person. There are spiritual legalities that a lot of people are not aware of. And because you're not aware of it, you fall victim to it. This is how things like witchcraft work. Sleeping with people was, again, designed for marriage. However, if you do decide to do otherwise, you have to understand what may come with that. Do you know people actually have rituals through consummation? Let me get off that because I don't think y'all ready for that one, and neither is YouTube. So, in essence, you are what you eat and you are who you sleep with. There are things that happen when you create soul ties on a metaphysical level that even if your subconscious is not aware of, others can see it because of their experience outside of your reality, of your perception of what reality is. We spoke about perceptions on this channel, which you may look at as 6, I may look at as 9. In reality, it could be either. Think about that. And the truth is, being equally yoked is more than just being equal in some things, but it's about balancing and strengthening reciprocity, teamwork, all the things when it comes to morals, your spirits, your emotions, your mentality. Then you can focus on having fun physically. But there's certain conversations and getting to know people that need to take place first if you plan on being serious and if you plan on marrying your person. Sometimes who we even think of as our person is not our person. That person was supposed to teach us a lesson, but we jumped the gun. Fellas, don't make women make you feel bad for not necessarily wanting to rush and marry them. Okay? This is off the record. Do you know, especially within church, some women look at marriage as an idol? Instead of having the relationship they should have with God, or your personal relationship as a man you should have with God, they want what they want. They ask God for what they want. And then when they get it, where is God in the situation? Now, some of you may be wondering, how do I know if I have an unhealthy soul tie with someone? I posted 3 examples for the ladies on side A. Let's do it for side B. Number 1, you may spend your time thinking or obsessing over a partner's whereabouts, who they're with, their activities, even though you know or you've been feeling for a while that you shouldn't, but you have a sense of jealousy and possessiveness over said person. That is not a good indication of a healthy soul tie if y'all are not married. If you have done the deed, if you have knocked boots and you are feeling like this, where you know in your heart of hearts and your subconscious that you don't like the way this person makes you feel 60 to 70% of the time, but you only feel good knocking boots or knowing that you have an eye on them. That's not healthy, and that's not what God intended you to have to be happy. That's not healthy. Let's go to number two. Others may notice, for the worst, that your thoughts, your lifestyle, your behavior or behaviors have been almost, if not identical, to said person. You probably wouldn't even be introduced to it without them, but you refuse to leave them. I'll give you an example, fellas. You ever been with a girl and somehow, let's say you go into the gym to maybe play some basketball with your homeboys. And your homeboys, after hanging out with them for countless weeks or days or even months, they start to tease you about certain things that happen between you and your partner's relationship, right? Let's say it's the way that you picked up on her lingo, little slang words that she says now you've adopted because you've been spending so much time with her in more ways than one that you've now intertwined not just your spirits but your soul. So you take on her personality and she takes on a little of yours. And your friends are trying to tell you, you used to be a lot happier of a person. You used to have goals and ambitions. Whatever happened to you telling me a few months ago that you were starting your business and whatnot, and you were looking to start your podcast or you were looking to start your clothing brand? Because now that you're with so and so, I don't hear you talking about these things anymore. It's just what she wants, it's just with her plans. What's up with you? Maybe, fellas, you personally haven't been in this circumstance, but you know a friend that has. And as soon as I mentioned this example, you had at least one friend pop up into your head. And you're like, yo, that's crazy. One track. How did you know? That's an unhealthy soul tie, my boy. Yeah. Sometimes spiritually, remember how I mentioned that spirits can come with good or bad intentions and can be tied to emotions? Sometimes spirits can be sent to you to destroy your plans, to destroy your focus when it comes to your goals and your purpose on this earth to fulfill by the Creator. What if Michael Jordan was not the only one to make a successful sneaker? What if you were next best thing in line? But the enemy sent her, a Delilah, to disrupt your plans. You made certain transactions with this spirit that she carries, a succubus. She sucks the life out of you in more ways than one. Now you don't have the ambition to take on anything outside of what she wants. Do you see how dangerous that is and how it's not so casual anymore? Let's go to number three before I expose too much and YouTube kicks me off this. Number three, you find yourself feeling stuck and cannot move on by means of dating someone new. You make excuses for the person as well as making excuses as to why you can't move on. Fellas, you ever heard of the term stuck on stupid? Sometimes people will say things like love makes you stupid. To which I say, is it love that makes you stupid or is it infatuation that makes you stupid? Because there's a thin line between love and infatuation. You can love the idea of loving somebody but not love them. Ooh. What has she done for you versus what has God the Creator done for you? Because the last time I checked, I spoke about love on this channel and the four ways in which love is expressed in the Greek. Agape, unconditional love from the Father, is not the same as eros, as in what she may do for you tonight. Is it selfless love that she's giving you? Or is it very much masked as I have needs and you do too, and I can fulfill them, but they're only physical? Ooh. Ooh, brother, brother, what's that? What's that, brother? Once you start making excuses for a person you know in your heart of hearts is not for you, that is a very good indication that you are under a spiritual influence of a soul tie and not a healthy one. You might want to list the things that she's able to do for you versus the things you were doing with the help of God before you even met her and compare said lists, which may also lead me to another conversation because there's some things that you may want to clarify before becoming one, aka marrying, aka consummating with someone, and make sure that you're equally yoked and on the same page and headed towards the same goals when you're intimate. And again, what you do outside the will of God, you have to keep doing to maintain what's outside the will of God. I spoke about that on side A. There's some things that you may want to talk about that are wildly uncomfortable before you either hop into bed with somebody or say I do. For this instance, I'm going to pretend that you didn't do that. If you did, no judgment, don't beat yourself up because we all fall short of the glory of God. I fall short every day. Nobody likes to talk about it, but sin typically starts with a thought before it manifests. It worsens when you manifest things out loud, when you speak on it, because there's death and life in the power of the tongue. But let's go into this now. What are some things that you may want to clarify, okay, before you marry someone, say I do, or hop into bed with them? Let's look at number one. Do you agree on spirituality, religious beliefs, and morals? How spiritually irresponsible would it be if you were to hop into bed with somebody, knowing what you know spiritually, and the person who you hop into bed with, based off of temporary emotion and a spirit that you were working and operating under, you decide to make a permanent decision that may taint your soul just a little bit more and have spirits drive you further and further away from God and the plans that He has for you. A spirit of setback, a spirit of disappointment. Let's go to number two. Do you agree on how to run a household? Like I said on side A, if I had $5 for every podcast that has come out since 2020 in regards to how this should run in a household, gender roles, responsibility, all that, I wouldn't be working a 9 to 5. Okay? In fact, I'd take y'all all with me. We family now, locked in for life. If you can't even fathom how somebody may have differing opinions than you until you already consummated your relationship, do you know how dangerous that is? Especially, let's say, if, oops, now you have a family. You didn't understand that y'all didn't even agree on how to run a household before you laid down and created this child. But now you're struggling. You want to be serious because at one point maybe you did have love for this girl. You were in love with her. It wasn't just testosterone you were releasing during the time you were knocking boots. Now you're forced to rearrange your whole life and destiny around this innocent child and the person who's carrying the life of your legacy. Getting real, huh? Hope some of you are starting to sweat. Let's look at number 3. Do you agree on how to raise children or a child and how to discipline them? You will be surprised how a lot of people don't even know who they're sleeping with until they start families. That they start to see, oh, I may get along with you on a physical vibe, a mental vibe, a spiritual vibe, but morals and when it comes to raising children and what's right and wrong, I wasn't raised the same way this person was who I thought they had rainbows and butterflies come out their butt in bed. Respectfully, I thought this girl was the best nurturer ever because she hugged me after we did the deed. Now she over here, tired, fed up, bonnet on. She not even as cute as when I first met her. She's smoking bogeys, no shade. She look a little bit more aged. She don't even wear makeup no more. Who is this person and how did I get here? A lot of you are not asking the right questions and you're not doing the right investigative work before you decide to consummate things and make things serious by laying it down. Now you over here, you already at the baby shower, you see her side of the family. They don't believe in timeout. They don't believe in none of that, but you do. Too late. Buns in the oven. Buns in the oven at 350 and there's 5 minutes left on the countdown before the timer goes off. What you gonna do now, sir? Let's talk about number 4. How do you feel about hot topics that may cause a drift later? This is important, and I left 4 a little bit ambiguous in the sense that each relationship has its own struggles and things that they do or don't agree with. And I say this because it's kind of your responsibility to get to know somebody enough to vet them, as one would say, to make sure that even if you don't necessarily agree with their viewpoint on things, can you live with it without feeling the need to change their mind? Are you willing to take their no as a no and stand on it? Or is this going to bother you later where you pretend that you're okay with it? You're trying to change their mind, and when they don't, now you're upset. When they ask you about why you're upset, you pretend like it's nothing. No. Respect yourself enough to not just sleep with anybody without understanding the full grasp of who they are as a person. Because what you're willing to stand on and stand up for, others may not. This may come to things like politics. This may come to hot topics like religion, like morals, like we previously spoke of. There's certain things that I absolutely believe in that I'm not willing to shake or budge on. And I have to be okay with maybe walking away from the person, knowing that there may be somebody out there for me that believes the same thing I do. There may not be. But I respect myself enough not to let people persuade me and then be bitter or resentful about it later. Women tend to do this a lot, men. But it's also important for you to get to know her and to actively ask her if you care about her and you're willing to get to know her as much as possible before saying I do, to see what she actually agrees with and what she doesn't. Or before you even knock boots with her. If you decide you'd never want to legally get married, that's between you and God. That don't got nothing to do with me. It's none of my business what you do behind closed doors. Straight up. Let's go to number 5. How do you feel about each other's friends and families? Would you feel safe having your child or children around said people? Oh boy. Sir, you barely knew her. As an example, you barely knew her, but you decided to jump into bed with her, right? Only to find out you're starting to see a few patterns of generational curses in her family. She constantly speaks negative to her situation. She manifests negativity, but you didn't see it after 6 cocktails and decide to spend the night. Now she's preggers, and now she has you coming to the doctor's appointment, and there's some things that's going on. There's some health records you didn't know about. Maybe you're starting to see a pattern within her side of the family She didn't confide to you before you hopped into bed with her and had a child. But there's some Chesters, some weirdos in her family. And for whatever reason, you know that they have full exposure to her mother's house and they want to have your child come over to grandma's house. What you gonna say? No? Pretty hard to fight that one, right? Because not for nothing, when you marry somebody, consummation or legally, you're marrying their family and their trauma and triggers as well. It's not just y'all two, especially when creating a new life. Let's go with number 6. What do you feel about finances, responsibilities being split? You over here sleeping with sis or about to marry her, but you didn't ask the right questions. She expects you to go be the provider and pay all the bills while she's a stay at home mom, but you expected her to unquote go 50-50, but also take care of your kids, cook and clean, and have a job while you just have a job. But you come home from work and you're too tired to deal with anything else. All of this could have been avoided starting a family, knowing that the two of you weren't going to budge on your morals, your ideals, what you want, the end goal. You're not equally yoked to even agree on what should go on in a household, but you decide to sleep with sis and start a family. Do you see what's happening here? Your souls were already intertwined and it was very hard to see logic. All logic was thrown to the wayside. Y'all were acting on spirits and emotions, not logic, decided to live carefree, but doing things outside of the will of God. You have to keep doing what's outside the will of God to maintain what you have. Is it starting to make a little bit more sense here? So one track, how do you go about breaking soul ties and realigning yourself to attract equally yoked relationships and head towards the right soul destination? Well, understand that being wanted physically may feed your ego, but being valued should feed the soul, that being your body, your mind, and your spiritual self. And it should be honorary towards the creator and yourself, being that even the word says that a man or a woman who dishonors their body sins against themselves. That is the only sin mentioned in the Bible where legit, if you do it, you're really hurting yourself more than anybody else. Okay? And again, I'm not talking about this to shame anybody, to make anybody feel bad, but I need you to understand the seriousness and the gravity of the situation that you may be putting yourself in if you decide to take on whatever comes with marriage outside the actual marriage, if you catch my drift. It is spiritually irresponsible as a man in this society to not only sell yourself short when it comes to your destiny, the promises that the Creator has for you, but to indulge in constant binges of basically feeling and experiencing a high in hookup culture and not realizing that the high that you're chasing isn't bringing you towards the goals that you want or the desired result. For the man who's listening to this right now, if you decide that you want to legally be married, I don't think that getting it out of your system in a sense that pop culture tells you to is helping you get closer to that goal. If anything, it's not going to give you or attract the right woman that you want or need, because I could have sworn in the book of Genesis, man and woman were not designed to be alone. Woman was designed to be your helpmate, not your band aid solution. She is your equal who has different roles. She is to submit to you, But in order for her to be submissive to you, you must be submissive to the Creator who designed her for you and you for her. You may want to play king of your household, but understand playing king of your household means you have to continue making king decisions for everybody, not just you. Okay? And I say that with love. Now, with that being said, I want to thank you guys for sharing your time with me. Hopefully, you learned something out of this. Share if you care. I will be back soon. I can't say when with another episode. But until then, be mindful of who you allow to mingle with when it comes to the very essence of you, your soul, your spirit. Okay? And just remember, I'm going to use this as an analogy. You see this man driving right here? The car represents your soul. The car has a destination to go. But you, as the driver, your spirit man, your spirit has to lead the way to direct in which the car goes to. There's going to be obstacles in your path, in this plane, in this life. There's going to be certain spirits around you, certain things to deter you, certain signs that you may get from the Creator to not pass, to make a U-turn, to save you from obstacles. And it's okay if you run into a few obstacles. That's okay because it builds your spirit man. But at the same time, there's going to be certain signs or there's going to be certain obstacles that are going to try to disturb your soul man's peace. It's going to give you road rage on this path towards your destination. Sometimes it's going to hit with some storms. You're going to have some dark days. You might have some sunny days while you're navigating your soul to the promised destination. It's important to know that your associations, who you let inside the car, can actually hinder you from getting to your destination, or it can get you there and enhance your journey. Your road trip can become easier with who you let into your soul intertwined, or it can become harder and set you back. Sometimes people don't even know that the spirit they carry can be sent by the enemy to trip you up, to give your soul, your car, a flat tire, to do a lot of things. But with the help of the Most High, the Creator, the person who created the car, the manufacturer, check in with the manufacturer every now and then to better understand how the car or your soul operates, so that through discernment in the manual or the book, you're able to download certain revelation into your heart, your spirit, into your engine. I hope you got something out of this. Again, please share if you care. Track stars, I love you. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I will talk, type, and chat with you later. You know where to find me on Instagram. Send me an email if you want to talk about certain topics that you may think are taboo or that you may need clarification on. I'm here. We're a family. We are working on our track records. We are growing day by day with the help of the Most High. And I am happy to be of servitude. I'll see you later, track stars. Enjoy the rest of your day.